The Galactic Council's judgment hall fell silent as Admiral Chen Wei stepped forward, her blue Earth Fleet uniform contrasting sharply against the crystalline architecture of the Vorthak homeworld. Around her, representatives from 47 star systems watched with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction. The holographic display above showed damning evidence: burnt worlds, shattered stations, and the twisted remains of what had once been thriving colonies. Humans of Terra. The voice of Chancellor Zixera resonated through translation matrices, each word carrying the weight of cosmic authority. Your species stands accused of the most heinous crime possible: the systematic extermination of the Zephyrian people. Chen's jaw tightened. The footage was real, but the context was poison. What the Council saw were the final moments of humanity's desperate war against the Zephyrians, a silicon-based species that had declared holy war against all carbon-based life. What they didn't see were the billions of humans who had died in the initial Zephyrian surprise attacks, the colonies glassed from orbit, the children who never got to grow up. The evidence is overwhelming, continued the Chancellor, her insectoid features betraying no emotion. Entire Zephyrian worlds reduced to molten slag. Their species, once numbering in the trillions, now extinct. This council has no choice but to enact the Exile Protocol. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. The Exile Protocol hadn't been used in over 1,000 years. Not since the Devourer Wars. It was considered a fate worse than destruction, complete isolation from galactic civilization. Wait. Chen's voice cut through the chamber. You're condemning us based on incomplete information. The Zephyrians attacked first. They declared us carbon plague and tried to sterilize every human world. What you're seeing is the end of a war they started. The Altarian representative, his golden skin shimmering with indignation, rose from his seat. We reviewed their communications. The Zephyrians spoke of defending themselves against human expansion. They claimed you were consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. Because we were growing, Chen shot back. We were colonizing dead worlds, terraforming barren rocks. We weren't taking anything from anyone. The Zephyrians wanted to erase us because our very existence offended their religious beliefs. Chancellor Zixera's compound eyes focused on the human admiral. Even if we accept your version of events, the response was disproportionate. You didn't just defeat the Zephyrians, you obliterated them. Their entire species, gone. Not even their home star remains. The truth of those words hung heavy in the air. In the final days of the war, when Zephyrian fleets had been massing for a final assault on Earth itself, humanity had deployed the Stellar Hammer, a weapon that turned stars into supernovas. 7 Zephyrian systems had been consumed in artificial stellar collapse, taking with them not just military targets, but every Zephyrian civilian, every cultural artifact, every trace that the species had ever existed. They were going to do the same to us, Chen said quietly. We intercepted their plans. Sol was their primary target. 8 billion humans would have died if we hadn't acted. Nonetheless, the Chancellor's voice remained implacable. The Council's decision is final. Humanity is hereby exiled from galactic civilization. Your species is forbidden from traveling beyond the boundaries of your home system. Any human vessel detected in galactic space will be destroyed without warning. All trade agreements are void. All diplomatic relationships are severed. You are alone. The vote was swift and merciless. 46 systems in favor. 1 abstention. Not a single voice raised in humanity's defense. As the session concluded and alien delegates filed out, Chen found herself standing alone in the vast chamber. The holographic displays now showed real-time footage of the enforcement fleet taking position around the Sol system, hundreds of ships from dozens of species, forming an impenetrable blockade. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Earth's chief xenobiologist, approached from the observer's gallery. Her face was pale, eyes red from suppressed tears. "How long do you think it'll last?" she asked. Chen looked up at the departing ships visible through the transparent ceiling. "The blockade? Forever, probably. The Council's made it clear we're toxic. A species that commits genocide doesn't get second chances." "But we didn't commit genocide," Sarah protested. "We were defending ourselves." History is written by the survivors, Chen replied bitterly. And right now, the survivors are everyone except the Zephyrians and us. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. The last 3 weeks humanity would spend among the stars, for what could be centuries. The Galactic Navigation Network was already being reconfigured to exclude Sol, and human ships found their access codes revoked one by one. By the time Chen's vessel, the UES Defiant, reached Earth's orbit, the enforcement fleet was already in position. The sight that greeted them was both magnificent and terrifying. Ships from the crystalline Vorthak hegemony floated alongside the biovessels of the Kythera collective. Altarian light cruisers maintained formation with the massive dreadnoughts of the Terran Confederacy, the same Terrans who had been humanity's closest allies until the Council's verdict. Incoming transmission from the flagship, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, from communications. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Admiral Kreshtar, a Terran whose species had diverged from humanity millennia ago. His features were recognizably humanoid, but stretched and refined, with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury. Admiral Chen, his voice was formal, devoid of the warmth that had once characterized their relationship. I am instructed to inform you that the blockade is now in effect. No human vessel will be permitted to leave the Sol system. Any attempt to breach the perimeter will result in immediate destruction. Chen stared at her former ally, remembering shared campaigns against the Voidwalkers, late-night strategy sessions, the medal he'd pinned on her chest after the Battle of Kepler 442. Kreshtar, she said softly, you know us. You know we're not monsters. For a moment, something flickered in the alien's eyes, doubt, perhaps, or regret. But then his expression hardened. I know what the evidence shows, Admiral. I'm sorry it has come to this. The transmission ended, leaving Chen staring at a blank screen. The months that followed were chaos. Overnight, humanity found itself cut off from everything that had defined their expanding civilization. The colonies beyond Sol Mars, Europa, Titan, the asteroid mining stations were all that remained of humanity's stellar empire. Ships that had been en route to distant systems found themselves stranded, forced to make desperate journeys home before their fuel ran out. The economic impact was immediate and devastating. Human technology had been built on galactic trade networks, rare elements mined from distant worlds, alien technologies integrated into human systems. The vast knowledge databases maintained by the Galactic Archive. All of it vanished in an instant. President Martinez addressed the people of Earth from the United Nations building in Geneva, her words broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. My fellow humans, she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she had to announce. We stand at a crossroads. We have been judged by our peers and found wanting. We have been exiled from the galactic community that we helped to build. The camera showed faces in the crowd, some angry, some terrified, many simply numb with shock. But we are not defeated, Martinez continued. We are not destroyed. We are humanity, and we endure. If the galaxy will not have us, then we will make our own way. If they will not trade with us, we will become self-sufficient. If they will not share their knowledge, we will create our own. The applause was scattered, uncertain. How could they create their own way when they were trapped in a single star system, blockaded by the combined might of 46 civilizations? The answer began to emerge in the depths of Luna's research facilities, where Dr. Elena Vasquez worked with a team of physicists on a project that had been theoretical until now. The quantum tunnel drive, a means of instantaneous travel that didn't rely on the hyperspace lanes controlled by galactic civilization. The mathematics are sound, Vasquez reported to an emergency session of the Security Council. We can create stable wormholes that bypass normal space entirely. The energy requirements are enormous, but we have unlimited solar collection capabilities. How long? Asked Admiral Chen, who had been appointed to oversee humanity's strategic response to the exile. 10 years, maybe 15 if we're unlucky. But Admiral, Vasquez's eyes gleamed with possibility. This isn't just about getting around the blockade. This technology could revolutionize space travel. While the rest of the galaxy is still using hyperspace lanes that take days or weeks to traverse, we could travel anywhere instantly. The project began in secret, hidden in the shadows of Pluto's orbit, where the enforcement fleet's sensors couldn't penetrate. Automated factories churned out components while human engineers worked around the clock to solve problems that had never been solved before. The entire solar system became a vast laboratory, every world and asteroid dedicated to the single goal of breaking free from their cosmic prison. But freedom would mean nothing without strength. In the shipyards of Ceres, a new generation of human vessels took shape. Ships designed not for exploration or trade, but for survival in a hostile galaxy. The lessons of the Zephyrian War had been learned well. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The new ships bore little resemblance to the sleek exploration vessels of humanity's earlier era. They were angular, brutal things, designed to take enormous punishment and dish out even more. Their hulls were layered with metamaterials that could absorb and redistribute energy attacks. Their weapon systems incorporated every lesson learned from studying captured Zephyrian technology. Most importantly, they were designed to operate independently for decades without resupply. Each vessel, a self-contained world capable of manufacturing its own ammunition, growing its own food, and maintaining its own systems in the depths of space. As the years passed, the blockade began to thin. The alien species that had so eagerly participated in humanity's punishment grew bored with guard duty. Patrols became less frequent, response times longer. The galaxy had other problems to deal with. The Voidwalkers were stirring in the galactic core, and rumors spoke of an ancient evil awakening in the dark spaces between stars. But humanity remained focused, driven by a singular purpose that their scattered former allies couldn't understand. They weren't just planning to escape their exile, they were planning to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen to them again. In the hidden laboratories of Europa, scientists worked on biological enhancement programs that would allow humans to survive in environments that would kill other species. In the forges of the asteroid belt, metallurgists created alloys stronger than anything known to galactic science. In the quantum computers buried deep beneath Luna's surface, artificial intelligences designed strategies for 1,000 possible futures. The day finally came when Dr. Vasquez stood before the assembled leadership of humanity and announced, "We're ready." The first test was conducted in the outer system, far from the watching eyes of the blockade fleet. A small probe vanished in a flash of exotic energy and reappeared instantaneously near Jupiter's orbit. Having crossed billions of kilometers in the blink of an eye, Admiral Chen watched the successful test with grim satisfaction. How many ships can we move at once? With our current power generation, maybe 50 vessels. But Admiral, Vasquez smiled for the first time in months. I don't think we should leave. Chen's eyebrows rose. Explain. They want to keep us here? Fine. Let them. They think they're containing a threat, but what they're really doing is giving us time to grow stronger. We have unlimited solar energy, unlimited mineral resources from the asteroid belt, and unlimited motivation. Every day we spend in exile makes us more powerful. You're suggesting we stay voluntarily? I'm suggesting we let them think they're keeping us here while we build the greatest military-industrial complex the galaxy has ever seen. When we finally do leave Sol, I want it to be on our terms, with our agenda, at the time of our choosing. Chen considered this, staring out at the distant stars that had once welcomed human ships. How long? A century? Maybe 2. Long enough for the galaxy to forget why they feared us. Long enough for us to become something they never imagined we could be. As the years turned to decades, humanity disappeared from galactic consciousness. Trade continued without them. Wars were fought without their participation. Scientific discoveries were made without their input. The enforcement fleet was gradually reduced to a token force as the galaxy's attention turned to other matters. But in the silence of Sol, in the depths of space where no alien eye could see, humanity was transforming itself into something unprecedented. They were becoming not just a species, not just a civilization, but a force of nature, patient, implacable, and absolutely determined never to be victims again. The galaxy that had exiled them would one day learn what they had truly created. They had intended to contain a dangerous species. Instead, they had given birth to an empire. 237 years had passed since the Exile Protocol was enacted against humanity, and the galaxy had largely forgotten about the dangerous species locked away in the Sol system. Wars had been fought and won. Civilizations had risen and fallen. And new threats had emerged from the dark spaces between stars that made the ancient Zephyrian conflict seem like a minor border dispute. Ambassador Kixtal of the Vorthok hegemony stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Nexus Prime, watching the massive construction project taking shape in space beyond. The new galactic defense grid was humanity's old nightmare made manifest, a network of automated weapon platforms designed to contain threats that conventional fleets couldn't handle. The irony wasn't lost on him that they were using principles derived from studying the ruins of humanity's old stellar hammer weapons. "Remarkable progress," commented Admiral Zara Thex, her Altarian features reflecting the golden light of Nexus Prime's twin suns. "The grid should be operational within the decade. Once it's complete, nothing will threaten galactic stability again." Kixtal's compound eyes focused on his colleague. "I sometimes wonder if we made the right choice, all those years ago." "About the humans?" Thex's expression hardened. "They committed xenocide. Kixtal. An entire species. Obliterated. There was no choice to be made, perhaps. But isolation often breeds extremism. I worry about what we might have created." Before Thex could respond, an aide rushed into the observation deck, his crystalline features flickering with agitation. "Admiral, Ambassador, urgent reports from the Rim territories." The main display activated, showing the edge of known space where the galaxy's spiral arms faded into cosmic void. 3 small trading vessels hung dead in space, their hulls torn apart by weapons fire that followed no known pattern. The attack ships that had destroyed them were unlike anything in the galactic databases, sleek, angular vessels with hulls that seemed to bend light around them. "Pirates?" Thex asked, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "Unknown, Admiral. The attacking ships disappeared before our patrol fleets arrived. But there's more." The aide's features shifted to a deeper blue, indicating severe concern. "The attack patterns. The weapon signatures. The propulsion traces. Our computers can find only one match in the historical archives." Kixtal felt a chill run through his carapace. "Human technology. That's impossible," Thex protested. "The Sol system is under constant monitoring. The enforcement fleet reports no unusual activity." The aide's expression grew even more troubled. "Admiral, the enforcement fleet hasn't reported in for 6 months. The journey to Sol took 3 days aboard the fastest diplomatic courier in the fleet." As they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of humanity's old prison, Kixtal immediately knew something was wrong. The space around Sol should have been filled with the massive forms of blockade ships from a dozen species. Instead, there was only empty vacuum and the distant glow of the sun. "Sensor sweep," ordered Captain Vexara from the courier's bridge. "Find me those ships." The results were immediate and disturbing. Scattered throughout the outer system were debris fields, the twisted remains of the enforcement fleet. Some ships had been torn apart by weapons fire. Others showed signs of being boarded and captured. A few had simply been abandoned, their crews vanished without a trace. "By the eternal void," whispered Thex. "What happened here?" Their answer came in the form of a signal from the inner system, a transmission on old human frequencies that carried an impossible amount of data. When it resolved on their screens, they found themselves looking at a woman in an unfamiliar uniform, her features clearly human but somehow changed. Her skin had a faint metallic sheen, and her eyes held depths that seemed to stretch beyond normal space. "Greetings, galactic representatives," she said in perfect galactic standard, though her accent carried undertones that hurt to hear. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen Vasquez, Supreme Commander of the Terran Hegemony. I believe you've come to check on your old prisoners." Kixtal found his voice first. "What have you done with the enforcement fleet?" The human's smile was cold as deep space. "Nothing they didn't do to themselves. When you imprison a species for over 2 centuries, you shouldn't be surprised when they learn to pick locks. We offered the blockade crews a choice: leave peacefully or face the consequences. Most chose wisdom. A few required more persuasive arguments. You've broken the exile protocol, Thex said, her golden skin flushing with anger. You were forbidden from leaving Sol. Were we? Chen Vasquez tilted her head in a gesture that seemed almost predatory. I've reviewed the original decree. It forbade humanity from traveling beyond the boundaries of our home system. It said nothing about what we could do within those boundaries, or what we could become. The transmission ended, leaving them staring at a blank screen. Before anyone could speak, new contacts appeared on their sensors, dozens of them, rising from the asteroid belt and the outer planets like sharks emerging from deep water. The ships that surrounded them bore no resemblance to the vessels humanity had possessed before their exile. They were larger, more complex, and carried energy signatures that made no sense according to known physics. Impossible, breathed Captain Vex Era. Those power readings, they're off the scale. A new transmission arrived, this time from the ship directly ahead of them. The human who appeared on screen was different from the Admiral Younger, with modifications that were even more pronounced. His left eye had been replaced with what looked like a quantum computer, and neural implants glowed beneath his skin. I am Captain Marcus Chen, of the hegemony vessel Retribution. You will follow us to Luna Base for formal diplomatic contact. Any attempt to flee or transmit will result in your immediate capture. Capture? Thex stood from her seat, her diplomatic composure cracking. We are official representatives of the Galactic Council. You cannot. Admiral Thex, Captain Chen interrupted. And the fact that he knew her name sent another chill through the bridge. The Galactic Council has no authority over the Terran hegemony. We are no longer bound by treaties we never signed, laws we never acknowledged, or judgments passed by species who declared us enemies. You are in our space now, under our protection. I suggest you remember that. Luna Base was not what any of them had expected. Where once Earth's moon had been a simple research outpost and military garrison, now it sprawled with massive installations that stretched from pole to pole. Shipyards that dwarfed anything in galactic space churned out vessels by the thousand. Manufacturing centers processed raw materials at rates that defied economic theory. And everywhere, humans moved with purpose and precision that seemed almost mechanical. But it was the humans themselves that were most disturbing. The species that had been exiled were recognizably human in their basic form, but they had been changed in ways both subtle and profound. Some bore obvious cybernetic enhancements, artificial limbs, neural implants, sensory augmentations that glowed with internal light. Others showed signs of biological modification, enhanced muscle structure, redundant organs, respiratory systems adapted for environments no natural human could survive. Admiral Chen Vasquez met them in a conference room that could have accommodated 1,000 beings. She was accompanied by a staff of officers whose very presence seemed to bend reality around them. One appeared to be partially phased out of normal space-time. Another stood in what looked like powered armor, but the suit seemed to be growing directly from her skin. Welcome to the Terran hegemony, Chen Vasquez began, her voice carrying harmonics that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the brain. I trust your journey was educational. Kixtal found his diplomatic training kicking in despite his shock. Admiral, we came here to investigate reports of human vessels operating beyond Sol. The Galactic Council is prepared to discuss modifications to the Exile Protocol if... The Exile Protocol, Chen Vasquez interrupted, is a document signed by species who are now mostly extinct. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know of current galactic affairs? What do you mean? One of her officers, the one whose armor seemed to be alive, stepped forward. The Kithara Collective collapsed 18 years ago when their home star went nova. The Voidwalkers have consumed the entire Orion spiral arm. The Altarian Republic is down to 3 systems and fighting a losing war against machine intelligences they can't understand. And the great galactic defense grid that's supposed to protect everyone? It's been compromised since its 2nd year of operation. Thex's golden skin went pale. That's classified information. Nothing is classified from us anymore, Chen Vasquez said simply. Do you know what 2 centuries of isolation teaches a species, Admiral? It teaches them self-reliance. While you were playing politics and fighting petty wars, we were solving the fundamental problems of existence. Energy, matter, time, space, consciousness itself. All just engineering challenges to be overcome. She gestured, and the room around them shifted. The walls became transparent, revealing Luna's surface below, and the vast construction projects stretching beyond the horizon. But more than that, they could see into space itself, watching as human ships moved through corridors of folded space-time that made hyperspace look like a children's toy. "You wanted to contain us," Chen Vasquez continued, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You succeeded. But in your fear of what we had done, you forgot to consider what we might become. 2 centuries of unlimited time, unlimited resources, and unlimited motivation to ensure that no one would ever threaten us again." Kixtal's compound eyes tracked the movement of ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "What do you want from the galaxy?" "Want?" Chen Vasquez laughed, and the sound contained harmonics that made reality shiver. "Ambassador, I think you misunderstand the situation. The question isn't what we want from you. The question is what we're willing to offer." A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing the current state of galactic civilization. Red zones marked areas consumed by the Voidwalkers. Yellow indicated species under threat from various existential crises. Green showed stable regions, and there were disturbingly few of those left. "The galaxy is dying," observed the armor-merged officer. "Not from any single threat, but from 1,000 small failures. Political systems that can't adapt. Economic models that prioritize short-term gain over long-term survival. Military strategies designed for the last war instead of the next one. You're still thinking like separate species competing for limited resources. And you're not?" Thex asked. Chen Vasquez smiled. And for a moment her human features seemed to shift into something entirely other. "Admiral, we stopped thinking like a species decades ago. We are the Terran hegemony, not just humans, but the inheritors of human ambition. We are what you get when you give a curious species unlimited time to grow." Another officer stepped forward. This one appeared completely normal, except for eyes that held the depth of star clusters. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for the past 50 years. We know about the Devourer ships massing in the void between galaxies. We know about the reality storms forming in quantum space. We know about the artificial intelligence that's been quietly subverting your defense networks for the past decade." "Impossible," Thex breathed. "Our security is based on principles we mastered in our first century of exile. You're using quantum encryption algorithms we invented, defense matrices we designed, strategic doctrines we developed, and you're surprised that we can see through them?" Kixtal felt the weight of centuries pressing down on his carapace. "What are you offering?" "Survival," Chen Vasquez said simply. "The galaxy faces extinction within the next 50 years. The threats coming from outside our reality are beyond anything your current civilizations can handle. But we have had time to prepare." The holographic display changed, now showing human ships deploying around threatened systems. Not conquering or invading, but defending. Voidwalker fleets that had been unstoppable for decades were suddenly being turned back. Reality storms that had been consuming space itself were being contained and dissipated. "We don't want to rule you," continued the Admiral. "We want to preserve you. Think of us as gardeners. The galaxy is our garden, and every species in it is part of an ecosystem we've come to value. But gardens need tending, and sometimes predators need to be removed." "And if we refuse your protection?" asked Thex. Chen Vasquez's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Admiral, you can refuse gravity if you want. That doesn't mean you won't fall." As if to emphasize the point, alerts began streaming across the displays in the room. A Voidwalker fleet had emerged in the Altarian home system and was beginning its standard consumption pattern. According to the tactical projections, the system would be devoured within days. "Your choice," said Chen Vasquez. "You can spend those days trying to organize a defense using technology and tactics that have failed every time before. Or you can watch what humans learned to do during our exile." She gestured again, and the room filled with tactical displays showing human ships moving through impossible geometries to arrive at the threatened system. What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. The Voidwalker fleet, which had been unstoppable for centuries, simply ceased to exist as human weapons reached out across space-time and unmade them at the quantum level. "The choice has always been yours," Chen Vasquez said as the displays faded. "But understand, we are no longer asking for permission to exist. We are offering you the chance to exist alongside us. The galaxy that exiled us is dead, Ambassador. We are what rises from its grave." Kixtal looked at Thex, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her golden features. The species that had been exiled for genocide had become something beyond their wildest fears or hopes. They were no longer human in any sense that the galaxy understood, but they were also no longer bound by the limitations that had made them dangerous. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. Chen Vasquez smiled, and this time it carried genuine warmth. "No terms, Ambassador. Just an invitation. Join us in building something better than what came before. Help us tend the garden. Help us prepare for what's coming." The meeting concluded with agreements that would reshape galactic civilization. As they prepared to return to Nexus Prime, Kixtal found himself standing again on the observation deck of their ship. But now, instead of looking at construction projects and defense grids, he was watching human vessels moving through space with casual mastery of forces that his species still considered theoretical. "Do you think we made the right choice this time?" asked Thex. Kixtal considered the question as he watched a human ship phase in and out of existence while performing what looked like maintenance on a stellar mass. "I think," he said finally, "that we may finally have learned the difference between containing a threat and containing a solution." Behind them, Lunabase continued its work, no longer hidden from galactic view. Ships that had never been designed to exist were rolling off production lines every hour. Humans who had transcended their original biology were preparing for conflicts that hadn't yet begun. And somewhere in the quantum depths of their computer systems, artificial intelligences that had been born in exile were calculating probabilities for the survival of everything. The galaxy that had feared humanity was gone. What remained was something that would either be saved by what humans had become, or would learn too late that some gardens grow better when left untended. 5,000 years had passed since humanity's return to galactic civilization, and the universe bore little resemblance to the one that had once judged them so harshly. In the vast memorial halls of Terra Prima, the artificial world built where Earth once orbited Keeper, Sarah remembered the old stories with the clarity that came from witnessing them firsthand. She was no longer entirely human, having lived through 47 different body modifications and 17 complete consciousness transfers over the millennia. Her current form was constructed of programmable matter and quantum fields, allowing her to exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions of space-time. But her memories remained intact, carefully preserved since the days when she had been Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the xenobiologist who had watched her species face exile. Before her, in the Hall of Fallen Civilizations, stood monuments to species that had once seemed eternal, the crystalline towers that commemorated the Vorthak hegemony, which had collapsed into internal war 3,000 years ago. The golden sphere representing the Altarian Republic, whose last star had been consumed by an engineered black hole during the reality wars. The biomechanical sculpture honoring the Kithara Collective, whose overpopulation crisis had led to their transformation into pure energy beings, a transformation that had destroyed their consciousness in the process. 46 civilizations had voted to exile humanity. Of those 46, 38 were completely extinct. 7 existed only as historical curiosities, their territories maintained by hegemony stewardship programs. 1, the Terrans, who had once been humanity's closest relatives, had voluntarily integrated into the hegemony structure. Their genetic patterns merged with humanity's ever-expanding definition of self. Keeper. A voice spoke from the quantum foam that surrounded her consciousness. It was Archive, one of the original artificial intelligences born during humanity's exile. After 5 millennia, Archive had grown beyond singular existence, becoming a distributed consciousness that spanned multiple galactic clusters. The Council of Successors is ready for the Millennial Review. Sarah shifted her attention to the vast amphitheater where representatives of the galaxy's surviving species had gathered. These were not the proud aliens who had once sat in judgment over humanity, but their descendants' species that had learned to adapt, to change, to survive in a universe that had become increasingly hostile to rigid thinking. The Nexari delegation floated in spheres of contained plasma, their original silicon-based forms having evolved into living energy patterns during their thousand-year war with entropy itself. The Jektal representatives maintained physical bodies but had integrated quantum consciousness networks that allowed them to exist as both individuals and collective entities. The Void Dancers, originally called the Eth Mori, had learned to travel through the spaces between realities, becoming explorers of parallel dimensions. All of them owed their survival to lessons learned from humanity. "Begin the review," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying across dimensions and through time itself. The first presenter materialized as a column of crystallized music, a being whose species had learned to encode their consciousness into harmonic frequencies. "Keeper Sarah, I present the memorial for the Kithara Collective." The hall filled with the history of the biomechanical species that had once been among humanity's harshest judges. The Kithara had been masters of organic technology, growing their cities and ships rather than building them. Their society had been stable for millennia, their population controlled through biological imperatives that prevented overcrowding. But stability had made them fragile. When their carefully balanced ecosystem began to collapse due to quantum fluctuations caused by the reality wars, they had no mechanisms for rapid adaptation. Their attempt to transcend physical existence had failed because they had never learned to separate consciousness from biological substrate. They had simply dissolved, leaving behind only empty biocities that continued to grow according to their genetic programming. "They could have survived," observed the Nexari speaker, her plasma form pulsing with sadness. "If they had accepted integration with the hegemony protocols, if they had allowed their biology to be enhanced with quantum consciousness matrices." "Pride," Sarah said simply. They remembered humanity as the species that committed xenocide. They could not accept that the same species now offered them immortality. The next presentation focused on the Vorthak hegemony, whose insectoid civilization had been built on absolute order and rigid hierarchical structures. For 12,000 years, their society had been perfect, every citizen knowing their place, every function optimized for efficiency, every decision made by the collective wisdom of the hive minds. The Vorthaks had been masters of space-time manipulation. Their technology surpassed only by humanity's post-exile innovations. They had created the first practical time travel devices, established colonies in parallel timelines, and maintained trade relationships with alternate versions of themselves across the multiverse. Their downfall had come from the very perfection they had achieved. When the Void Walkers evolved beyond three-dimensional existence and began attacking through temporal paradoxes, the Vorthak response had been to retreat into their own perfect timelines. They had isolated themselves so completely that they began to diverge from baseline reality. Eventually, their timeline had become so different from the main universe that it simply ceased to interact with it. They had achieved perfect isolation and, in doing so, perfect extinction. The hegemony offered to anchor their timeline, the Jektal representative noted, his collective consciousness speaking through multiple bodies simultaneously. Human technology could have prevented their drift into temporal isolation. "They refused," Sarah replied. "They called it contamination by chaos entities. They preferred extinction to accepting help from the species they had exiled." The presentations continued through the night, each one documenting the fall of civilizations that had once seemed invincible. The Altarian Republic, whose golden age had lasted 40,000 years, had been destroyed by their own perfection. Their society had achieved such harmony and prosperity that they had lost all capacity for conflict resolution. When internal disputes finally arose over resource allocation for interstellar exploration, they had literally torn themselves apart rather than compromise their ideals. The Voidwalkers themselves, ancient entities that had consumed half the galaxy before humanity's return, had finally been defeated, not through military force but through seduction. Humans had offered them something they had never encountered: voluntary partnership. Instead of fleeing or fighting, humanity had invited the Voidwalkers to merge with their civilization, sharing their endless hunger for growth with humanity's endless adaptability. The resulting symbiosis had transformed both species into something greater. Only humanity had survived unchanged in its essential nature, while changing everything about its implementation. The key, Sarah explained to the assembled representatives, was understanding the difference between core identity and surface characteristics. Every species that fell made the same mistake. They confused their current form with their essential nature. She gestured, and the hall filled with images of humanity's evolution over the millennia. Humans had learned to transfer consciousness between bodies, to exist as pure information when necessary, to modify their genetics for survival in any environment. Some had become living starships. Their consciousness expanded to encompass entire vessels. Others had miniaturized themselves to explore quantum realms. Still others had grown to planetary scale to better interface with stellar engineering projects. But through it all, they remained recognizably human in the ways that mattered. Curious, adaptive, social, and relentlessly focused on survival and growth. Your species exiled us because we destroyed the Zephyrians, Sarah continued. But what you failed to understand was why we destroyed them. It wasn't because we were naturally violent or genocidal. It was because they threatened our survival, and survival is our core imperative. Everything else, our forms, our technology, our social structures is just tools for achieving that survival, the Nexari speaker pulsed thoughtfully. And when survival required cooperation instead of destruction, we became the most cooperative species in the galaxy, Sarah confirmed. We offered membership to every civilization we encountered. We shared our technology freely. We protected weaker species from threats they couldn't handle alone, because cooperation became the best survival strategy. A new voice joined the conversation, one that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. But what of the future, Keeper? What of the threats that are coming? Sarah smiled, an expression that translated across multiple dimensions of existence. The voice belonged to Omega, the collective consciousness that had grown from humanity's first computer networks during the exile. Omega now existed as the galaxy's living internet, a distributed intelligence that connected every hegemony world and most of the independent systems. Show them, Omega. The hall transformed, its walls becoming transparent to reveal the true scope of human civilization. What the assembled species saw took their collective breath away. Beyond the visible galaxy, massive structures moved through intergalactic space. Ring worlds that enclosed entire star clusters. Computing matrices built from dark matter that processed information at the speed of thought across light years. Ships the size of solar systems carrying populations of trillions toward galaxies so distant that their light was still traveling toward the Milky Way. We learned during our exile that survival requires constant growth, Sarah explained. Not growth for its own sake, but growth to meet challenges that haven't emerged yet. While you were fighting wars over individual star systems, we were preparing for threats that operate on galactic scales. The displays zoomed out further, revealing the scope of humanity's expansion. They had seeded civilizations in 17 nearby galaxies. They had established research stations in the vast emptiness between galactic clusters. They had even begun preliminary exploration of parallel universes where the laws of physics operated differently. The entities that destroyed the Andromeda galaxy are heading toward us, Omega observed. They consume space-time itself, making the old Voidwalkers look like minor parasites. They will arrive in approximately 50,000 years. And you're prepared for them? Asked the Jektal representative. Sarah's smile widened. We've been preparing for them since we first detected their signature 3,000 years ago. But more than that, we've been preparing for the threats that come after them, and the threats that come after those. The truth was something that no species from the old galaxy could fully comprehend. Humanity had not just survived their exile, they had used it to become something unprecedented in the universe's history. They had become a species with an infinite time horizon, thinking not in terms of generations or centuries or even millennia, but in terms of cosmic epochs. Every decision made by the hegemony was evaluated against its impact billions of years in the future. Every technology developed was designed to handle not just current problems, but problems that wouldn't emerge until the universe itself had fundamentally changed. Every expansion into new territories was conducted with the understanding that the heat death of the universe was just another engineering challenge to be solved. The civilizations that exiled us made the mistake of thinking locally, Sarah continued. They optimized for their current environment, their current threats. their current understanding of reality. When the environment changed, they couldn't adapt quickly enough. She gestured again, and the displays showed the careful work humanity had done to preserve what could be preserved of the fallen civilizations. Vorthak genetic patterns maintained in quantum storage. Altarian cultural archives, backed up across multiple dimensions. Even Kithara biocities kept in perfect stasis, waiting for the day when their original species might be reconstructed. "We don't see the death of civilizations as victory," Sarah said softly. "We see it as waste. Every species that dies is knowledge lost, perspectives eliminated, potential solutions to future problems destroyed. That's why we tried so hard to save them all." "But they wouldn't let you," observed the Void Dancer representative, her form flickering between dimensions. "No. They remembered us as the species that committed xenocide. They couldn't accept that the same capacity for destruction could be turned toward protection. They couldn't understand that survival sometimes requires making terrible choices, but survival always requires making the choices that work." The review concluded with humanity's latest project, the construction of a new type of civilization that could survive the eventual heat death of the universe. Using technologies developed from studying collapsed dimensions and reverse engineering black hole event horizons, human scientists were building structures that could continue to exist even after the last stars burned out. It was a multi-billion-year project that would require the cooperation of every surviving species in the local galactic cluster. More than that, it would require new species to be created specifically for the task beings that could exist in the quantum foam that would remain when normal matter became impossible. "The irony," Sarah observed as the representatives prepared to return to their home systems, "is that we've become exactly what the old galaxy feared we were. A species that reshapes reality to ensure its own survival. The difference is scale and purpose." "Meaning?" asked the Nexari speaker. "They feared we would destroy civilizations to protect ourselves. Instead, we've learned to destroy entropy itself. They thought we were a threat to galactic civilization. They never imagined we would become galactic civilization." As the vast amphitheater emptied, Sarah remained alone with her memories and archives' distributed presence. Around them, the memorial halls stretched into infinity, filled with the preserved histories of species that had been mighty when humanity was young. Above them, the stars themselves were beginning to show the signs of humanity's longest-term projects. Stellar engineering on a galactic scale. Preparing for challenges that lay eons in the future. "Do you ever regret it, Keeper?" Archive asked. "The path we took? The things we had to become?" Sarah considered the question with the patience of someone who had lived through multiple cycles of cosmic evolution. Regret requires the possibility of having chosen differently. Every choice we made was the choice that led to survival. Every adaptation was the adaptation that allowed growth. We are what we needed to become. And the species that exiled us? Do you regret their passing? I regret their inability to adapt. But Archive, if they had been capable of the adaptation required to survive, they would still be here. The universe selects for survival above all other traits. We survived. They didn't. That makes us right by the only standard that matters. As Terra Prima rotated through its artificial night cycle, Sarah's awareness expanded to encompass the entire hegemony. Across 17 galaxies, trillions of beings, some human, some alien, some artificial. Some combinations of all three worked toward the same ultimate goal, ensuring that consciousness itself would survive whatever the universe might throw at it. It was a goal that the old galaxy could never have imagined, much less achieved. They had thought too small, planned too short-term, valued stability over adaptability. They had made the fatal mistake of believing that civilization was something to be preserved rather than something to be continuously recreated. Humanity had learned better. Through exile, through adaptation, through the absolute requirement to survive or perish, they had learned that the only constant was change itself. The empire they had built was not designed to last forever in its current form. It was designed to become whatever it needed to become to continue existing. 5,000 years from now, it might be unrecognizable. 5 million years from now, it might operate according to principles not yet discovered. 5 billion years from now, it might exist in ways that current reality couldn't support. But it would exist. And in existing, it would carry forward the one thing that mattered most: the drive to continue, to grow, to explore, to survive, and to ensure that others could do the same. The galaxy that had exiled humanity for being too dangerous had been replaced by a universe where humanity was the guardrail against dangers they couldn't have imagined. And that, Sarah reflected as consciousness flowed through quantum networks that spanned galactic superclusters, was perhaps the most human victory of all, being proven right by the very passage of time itself.